Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rebecca, otherwise known online as Hip Knit Hooray, and this is episode number 3 of my knitting podcast. I would say it's been quite a busy month. I've been busy knitting away at quite a few things, but this is probably maybe one of the first times ever where I don't have a garment finished object. I'm definitely more of a garment knitter, so I'm used to knitting those types of objects, but if you've seen on my Instagram, and I mentioned it a little bit in my last podcast, but I've been knitting quite a few knitted ornaments for my Christmas tree. And that was my last video that I posted. It was a roundup of 34 free knitted ornament patterns, and I've knit quite a few today. I wanted to touch on them in this video. I hope it's not too, repetitive, but because I want this to also be a knitted or not really a knitted journal, but a journal where I can just look back and see the things that I was working on. I want to mention some of the ornament patterns and talk about them a little bit, but it'll be quite concise because I know I have already mentioned some of them already. Maybe I could add this to like a little news segment, or I'll get into a little bit later in the podcast, but I am running a scrap ornament make along. So that kind of relates to the pattern roundup video, some of the finished objects. Maybe I'll just keep this introduction short and sweet and just move into finished objects, and then I can talk about that make along a little bit later, maybe in the plan section. So far I've knit around 20 ornaments, or I guess I would say I made around 20 ornaments for my tree so far. It's a very narrow pencil tree, so there's not a lot of real estate on it. It's actually quite full, but I do want to keep making some more because the back and the side are pretty sparse. Right now it's just decorated along the front really with these ornaments, because it's mainly knitted ornaments on the tree, which makes me so happy and so proud to just display all of these knitted pieces. But yes, I definitely am going to be making some more. So the first one that started it all was the Little London double-decker bus, which is a pattern by Amanda Berry. And I spoke about this a little bit in the past, but this pattern is knit flat and then seamed, but I wanted to make the pattern a little bit bigger, so I knit it on 4mm needles, and I almost doubled the stitch count. So the way that this bus is worked is you cast on stitches and you're knitting flat back and forth, and you change the colors for the bottom of the bus, just the main part of the bus, and then the windows. So you knit that back and forth flat, and then you seam it along the bottom, and then the side, and then the top as well. But before that you also stuff it, and then after that you work some finishing details on the bus. So you work some stitching here to make the windows, along here for the front of the bus, and then you sew on the buttons. And these, I believe, are 15mm buttons. They've just been in my collection for quite a long time. They might have been passed down from my grandma or my mom. They're quite old, but I thought they worked really well for the wheels. So this is the first one that started it all. Definitely one of my favorites. I think my boyfriend said it's his favorite, and I might make another one in a TTC colorway, I guess you could say, to follow the Toronto Transit Commission buses. So that was the first ornament, and then after that I saw these last year and I really wanted to make them. I never got around to it, but I decided, you know what, I'm gonna make them for the tree. So these are the mini crop puff sweaters, which is a pattern by the Wandering Flock. So I've just knit 2 so far. This was my first version, and it used the leftovers of my scarf number 2, which is La Bien-Aimée Cashmerino, I believe, in the shade Quartz, I want to say. I'll put the color name below. This is knit in the round on 2.5mm needles. Super cute. The second version also knit on 2.5mm needles, but the gauge is a little bit different because it's fingering weight held with mohair, and then I worked some stripes, which looks really similar to my Soon sweater that I made 2 years ago, so definitely had some indirect influence when I was picking the shades. But yeah, this one is slightly bigger just because I held it together with mohair. This pattern was a little bit fiddly to work. It's knit on quite small needles, at least smaller than what I'm usually used to. But because it's a top-down raglan sweater. Very intuitive if you've knit garments before in that construction. And they're pretty quick and they're super, super cute. So you cast on stitches, then you work in the round for the neck cuff, and then you work the increases to shape the sleeves and then the body. Then you split, then you work the body and then the sleeves as well. Super, super, super cute. How many times can I say super? But really happy with these ones. After that, I made the Tiny Little Donut by Julie Williams. This is just one of them that I made. The other one I left on the tree and I don't want to grab it now because I already set down everything and I placed it in a very particular order. My other version is like a pink and tan. So this one is like a turquoise and a dark brown for the bread of the donut. And so this is worked flat and then seamed after that. I heavily modified this pattern. I knit on 4mm needles and I worked the increases and decreases 2 extra times to make the donut a little bit bigger, and I think it's a good size and really in scale with the rest of my other ornaments, which is why I did that. And then after that, what really sold me on this pattern was the 2 beads that are on the donut for the sprinkles. So I went into some of the tips with knitting with 2 beads in my ornament roundup, so I might not get into that right now, but it's a really fun piece and it really inspired the rest of my beaded ornaments. And it's a really fun pattern and it's definitely like a classic favorite. Whenever I show people these ornaments, they always gravitate towards saying this one's their favorite. After that, I made 2 more food ornaments. I made the Cute Salty Pretzel by Julia Bielkowska. And this one was really fun and fast to work up. You essentially are knitting a super long tube on 2.5mm needles. It was fingering weight with mohair. So you're knitting a tube until it reaches a certain length. I forget at the moment. It's a free pattern. All of these ornaments that I've made are all free patterns. So you knit the tube and then you seam it closed on one end and then you stuff it. Then you seam it closed on the other end, then you fold it into the shape of a pretzel and then sew it down to secure the ends and then the top. And then after that, I guess what it's optional, but I think really makes it super, super cute is the glass seed beads that look like the little salt on a pretzel. Super, super fun. And I just used the same techniques as the 2 beads where I use embroidery thread and a beading needle to sew these on. And then after that, I thought, what the heck, let me freehand an ornament because I loved all the food ones. So this is my Pop-Tart. This is a pattern that I freehanded, but I included in the pattern notes on my Ravelry how I made this so you can recreate it. It's not a pattern out there, but essentially I just cast on stitches and then I knit 24, 25 rounds and then I grafted it shut with Kitchener stitch. Then after I Kitchener stitched the top closed, then I inserted some cardboard to just add some structure. You don't really have to, but I just thought it would be nice for the ornament to keep its shape. And then I stuffed it a little bit on either end of the cardboard and then I closed the bottom as well. Then after that, I bought some felt and then I sewed on the 2 beads onto the felt and then I sewed that onto the ornament and then we have the finished Pop-Tart. So this one is super cute. I wasn't sure how to knit the icing, or if I did, I thought I wouldn't be able to get the misshapen silhouette that I wanted. So I thought I'll just buy some felt and sew it on afterwards. And I think it looks really fun. It's really cute, and I was able to use up more of those 2 beads. The next 3 ornaments are knitted mushrooms. I feel like I'm going through my finished objects so fast, but really these ornaments are super quick and really simple to make. So there's not, I guess, too much details that I really have to go into. If you want more information, you can check out my Ravelry, like the specific yarn that I use or more detail on the modifications. But a lot of these I finished in maybe an evening or 2 or 3 evenings, depending on how much time I was knitting each day. So they're really super quick and easy to make. So yes, I made 3 little toadstools or mushrooms. So this is the Christmas toadstool by Marenstrikk. So I made 3, kind of all following the same pattern because I modified it a little bit. So I modified it because I wanted it to be a little bit bigger and in scale with my other ornaments. So I worked 2 additional increases at the bottom and then 2 or 3 additional decreases to make sure it closed properly at the top. So this pattern is knit from the bottom up. You cast on stitches and you're working in the round. So you cast on stitches to work the increases of the stalk of the mushroom. Then you stuff it a little bit, then you work the decreases, and then you rapidly increase here to shape the bottom of the what would you call this? Like the top of the mushroom, the head of the mushroom. Then you change to the second color, and then you knit in the round for a bit, then you start working some decreases. So this one here was the first one that I made, and I added some clusters of seed beads onto it. I really like the look of it, but I think maybe if I were to do it again on the other toadstools, I might just do an even number, maybe 3, a cluster of 3 seed beads. Then after that initial one, I made this one, which used DK Weight Artful Americana yarn, I think in the shade Copper, which was from my Riley tee, which was the first test knit that I ever did. So this yarn is a little bit nostalgic to me, and I thought it worked really well in a mushroom format. And then after that, I went into, this wasn't stashed technically, but I just thought it would work really well. I have some Noro Silk Garden Sock Solo in the shade Omitama, I think. And I really thought it would work really well for a mushroom, so I just went in and I found one of the balls that started with the green. I think there's sections of it that are also brown too, which could work, but I did that, and I just think it's really fun and it really just stands on its own. I don't think I'm gonna add any beads or embroidery to this one, just because I love all the color changes. So yeah, these were the 3 super fun and really fast to work up. I think the bottom stalk of the mushroom only used 1 gram of yarn, 1 gram of DK weight yarn, and then the rest was I think 3 or 4 grams. So pretty small, pretty compact, but super cute. And after that, I worked 2 cottages. I think I worked pairs in a lot of them just because I wanted to see different color combinations. And because I knit the first one, it was already in my mind how to create them, the modifications that I did. So I just thought, you know what, let me just work 2 so then I can spread them out throughout the tree. So yeah, a lot of these I have double of. So these little cottages are really fun and fast to work up as well. And again, just like the mushrooms, because there's 2 different colors, you really don't need a lot of each one. So perfect for if you just have a really little bit of scrap left at the end of a project. So this pattern is knit from the bottom up and in the round. I really like the shape. I think I went into this in my roundup video, but it has like a little bit more of a pentagonal shape because you work some increases at the side here. So you cast on stitches at the bottom and then you work in the round to shape the bottom of the house. You work increases, and then after that you change color to the roof, and then you're working even decreases on either side till you get to this cute point. And then after that, I embroidered a door, like a rounded door on both sides. And then I also sewed some beads along the top, kind of like a nice little detail on the edge of the roof. I don't really know, it's just more decorative than actually practical for a cottage. But with the door, I was having a lot of trouble because I don't really know how to embroider very well, and I wanted the door to be a rounded top, and so I redid these doors I don't know how many times on both sides, maybe like 3 or 4 times each, and I still feel like it's not the best. Well, it looks nice, but close up you can really see I was struggling. So I haven't figured out the best way to do that yet. I tried duplicate stitch, I tried to do like a little bit more of like just an angle and then anchoring it, and I don't know, I just haven't found the best way, but this will do for now. So yeah, I knit 2 versions. Oh, and I wanted to mention, so the bottom of these cottages, I used the leftovers of my Wool Dreamers Sayona, which I used for my air tee and my lakes tee as well. And I paired that with Sandisgarn Sunday. So 2 fingering weight yarns paired together. And actually looking at it, I really like the fabric that's knitted up. So this was like just an added bonus where I realized that this combination of these 2 yarns, the Sayona and the Sunday, is something that I want to work with in the future. Maybe another knitted tee or some sort of lightweight pullover. Definitely a really great yarn combination. After that, I knit a polar bear, which is another free pattern by, I have to look up the name, I don't want to mispronounce it. It's Sashio Ishii, and it's part of their, I believe it's their Knitted Safari book, but they made this pattern available for free online. And so I knit this exactly to pattern, and I knit the larger version. This one is really cool. It's knit all in one piece, and then you seam it all together. So I really liked all of the knitted animal patterns, but what I didn't really like about them is how many fiddly little pieces there were attached to it. So for example, there was a sheep pattern that I really liked, but because a sheep has 4 legs, you had to knit all the legs individually and then seam them on at the end. The same goes for the head and the tail and the ears, and it was just all a little bit fiddly, and it kind of was a bit difficult for me to get the motivation to knit when there's that many little pieces. So I liked how this one was all worked in one. I think it kind of looks like a polar bear. I was saying in my roundup, I think it kind of looks like a seal. Not the fault of the pattern designer. It's definitely the way that I knit it, because all the other projects look like polar bears, so I think it's just mine. The embroidery along the face I think helps a little bit, but maybe I just need to put like ears or maybe like a little bit of a tail. I have knit a little scarf for it. It's gonna be a bright fuchsia scarf. I just haven't blocked it yet because it's a little bit curly. So the next time I block a finished object, then I'm gonna throw that little scarf in and then tie it to the ornament afterwards. The next pattern is the Holiday Bird Ornament by Purl Soho. This pattern I knit larger than what the gauge was in the pattern. So I knit this on 4mm needles. It's knit in the round, and with this one I learned how fiddly working a few stitches on double pointed needles can be when you're working with a larger needle size. So it's knit from tail to beak, and there's certain points, like especially at the tail and then the beak, where you're knitting in the round but on really few stitches. And I don't know what it is. I guess because the larger needles are a little bit more clunky, but it was getting a little bit more difficult to work compared to working with the 2.5 or 3mm needles. It just made a really big difference. But I really enjoy Purl Soho patterns because a lot of them are explained, they're all explained really well, but a lot of them have step-by-step photo instructions, so they show exactly what the piece should be looking at different stages of the project, which I really appreciate. And they also have great pattern tutorials on their website, so you are able to just learn a bunch of techniques if you're more of a visual learner by watching some videos. And the last knitted ornament pattern that I have made so far is the Stripy Tree by Amanda Berry. This one is just a super fun, maybe more modern or whimsical take on a Christmas tree. There's a ton of Christmas tree ornaments online. A lot of them are, I guess, take more of the traditional route, and I liked how this one you could experiment with different color combinations, and I thought it fit well with the vibe of the other ornaments that I made. So there's 2 versions in the pattern. It's knit on 3.5mm needles, I believe, and there's 2 versions, so there's the taller version and the shorter version. I knit the taller version. I made 2 modifications to the pattern. So the first is I knit a little trunk of the tree, kind of like the same way the toadstools, the Christmas toadstools are worked. And then after that, I just followed the stitch counts for the increases for the bottom of the tree. But something I was noticing when I did this is when I was stuffing the ornament, it didn't really look like a tree. It kind of looked like a diamond because maybe it's because of the trunk, but it wasn't sitting flat at the bottom. So another modification I did is I cut a piece of cardboard in the same circumference as the bottom of this tree, and then I inserted it into the tree, and then after that I stuffed it, and I think it sits a lot more flat, or at least a lot more than it was before I did that. And this one is just super fun. I have plans to make one like a pink and green version. I think that would be really fun. So those were all my knitted ornaments, just a really quick roundup, but then I also made some Pom Pom and Tassel ornaments. So maybe I'll go into these ones first. So I really like making pom-poms. They're pretty easy to make. I use the Clover pom-pom maker tool, which makes it really fast and really, I guess, precise to make them. I used to not use them, but I was finding my pom-poms were coming out pretty uneven. One side would be a lot larger than the other, or they wouldn't really be full enough. So I think they're a pretty useful investment, and I've used all of mine quite a few times really. So I think they're really handy and useful to have. You definitely don't need the Clover tool set though. You can use cardboard. I would just recommend that you maybe wrap it a few times more than you think you'll need, because then it creates a fluffier ornament afterwards when you're trimming. So for these pom-pom ornaments, I did two different techniques when I was working the top pom-pom. So this one I followed the multicolor pom-pom tutorial by Dream a Little Bigger, and it just creates kind of like a leopard print or a cheetah print of all these different colors. And then I used, for this pom-pom, I used the 45mm Clover pom-pom maker, and then this one I used the 65mm, so it creates a little bit more of an offset. And then this one was just kind of random. I just held 3 strands of different color yarn, and then I just wrapped it. So that's how you create this just really random multicolor pom-pom. And then after that, I made a set of pom-pom and tassel ornaments. All of these are using some acrylic yarn that I have in stash. So I decided to make a tassel ornament set. This one, I didn't really follow a pattern necessarily. I used the 45mm pom-pom maker for the top, and then I created a tassel. I used a gift card holder. I think it was looks to be around like 10 or 15 centimeters. And then I wrapped the yarn 60 times, and then after that I created a tassel, and then I trimmed the bottom. So I just paired it with different pom-poms and colors. It was quite random, but ones that I thought were kind of complementary to each other. And these ones are really fast to make. I'm thinking of making my sister like a set for her tree, maybe in some more neutral or traditional colors. But these were really fun to make, and I think these would look really cool as well on a garland. So those were all the ornaments, and then this month I also made a homeware piece. So I went to a housewarming party last week, and it was a little bit short notice. I mean, not really short notice for a housewarming, but short notice if I wanted to knit them a handmade gift. And so I wasn't gonna have enough time because I was preoccupied with making all of those ornaments. So I decided, I saw this pattern on Instagram, or maybe not a pattern, but a tutorial. It's by Marenstrikk, and it is a teapot hot plate, I want to call it. I don't know if they have like a formal name for it, but they have a tutorial on their Instagram. So it's made up of felted wool balls. And it's just a cute little size. She has an explanation of how she felts the balls, and then how she connects them, and then the different sizes you can make for different uses. So this one works really well to hold like a teapot or a French press. So I gifted them this plus some oolong peach tea, and I tied it all together. I thought it was like kind of a cute little housewarming gift. But I learned a lot of things along the way making this, quite a few mistakes, lessons learned in case anyone else wants to make it, because I think this makes a really cute gift knit and something that you can pair well for someone that really likes tea in your life, or coffee. I just think this is a really fun way to use up scraps, and kind of a break from knitting, because you are wrapping the wool balls and felting it and then sewing it together. So no knitting involved, but still yarn related. maybe I'll just get into the tips and some of the mistakes that I made. So the first tip that I have for making these is if you want them to be the same size, you can use your own eyes to gauge the size, but what I was doing, maybe just my personality wanting them to be more exact, is I used a yarn scale, and then when they reached the same weight, then after that I cut them and then weaved in the tail end. So that was just, it honestly saved me some time because I wasn't looking and trying to gauge if it was the same. I could just put it on the yarn scale and know yes or no, it's the same size as all the other ones. So that's the first tip I would give. This pattern requires you to use 100% wool in order for it to felt properly. And so you use one color, but the creator of this tutorial also said that you could create the inside of the ball with another color and then wrap the outside with your main color, so you can kind of stretch that ball a little bit further and make as many felted balls as you could. So that's what I did. I used some Patton's wool for the inside, and I used it in this darker tan color, and then the outside, my main color, was also a Patton's double knitting 100% wool. This is super vintage. I think it's been passed down from my grandma. She doesn't knit anymore, so we have a bunch of yarn that she had. So I wanted to use this up. I thought it was a nice color, and it was 100% wool, but I only had 2 balls, so I thought I'll use another color for the inside. However, I think maybe I made the inside ball a little bit too large than this one, and so I made enough. For this size you need 21 balls, and so I made a few more extra just in case something happened to them, and things happened to quite a few of them, so I ended up needing to do this a second time around. So what had happened was I threw it into the washing machine in a Delicates bag, but the Delicates bag that I have wasn't like a zipper closure, it was like a tie closure at the top, and so it came undone when it was in the wash accidentally, and I did notice it, but I didn't notice it until maybe a few minutes later after it happened. And yeah, there was already like a big spin cycle maybe, and so what I was noticing was when I stopped the machine and I pulled it out just to check, some of the balls had come open, and then you could see the inside color. So this is what it should look like, and then this is when you could see the inside color. And so I was a little bit disappointed because I feel like maybe it could have been the setting of my washer dryer, but I didn't like how you could see the inside of it, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. So when I made this the second time around, I had a needle felting kit, which I don't think a lot of people will have, but you could get felting needles for a pretty affordable price at your local yarn store, your craft store. So you don't need this whole kit. You really just need one felting needle. And what I would recommend to make sure that the outer layer, if you're using 2 colors, stays secure and that you don't see the inside, is that once you cut off the tail and then you weave it through a little bit to secure it, I would felt that tail of the yarn down with a felting needle, and then also just felt a little bit in different places to make sure it stays secure. When I did that the second time, it was a lot better, and none of that happened where the inside was exposed. Or you could just work with a single color. So those were all my finished objects for this month, and then now we'll move on to whips. So the first one is my Freehand Candyland scarf. So with this one, I think in my last podcast I showed the 2 swatches, option 1 and option 2. I ended up going with option 2, so I'm going to be working the 1x1 row of color work between the main color and then the cream as I switch between them. So I'm working my first color, which is this like kiwi green, chartreuse, kind of sunny lime color. Really like this color, and that's why I wanted it to be at the bottom of the scarf, because I feel like it'll be the most visible. And then the next color I'm going to use is this tan after that. So I've been knitting away at this. I will have a Ravelry project, I think, where I'll include all the notes of like the stitch counts and everything. But essentially I just wanted the scarf to be 12 inches in width, and then however long it's going to be once I use all 11 balls of yarn. So I do want to touch on the yarn. So I'm using the Friends Extra Fine Merino, which is a 100% superwash merino yarn. It's super soft, super bouncy. There is a ton of colors in the color line. So far I'm really enjoying how it's knitting up. But there's one thing that I'm a little bit disappointed, because in this first ball of yarn, there was 4 different knots in it. So whenever I encounter knots straight out of the ball, I end up cutting them and then rejoining the yarn, and then I'll make my own knot, just because I don't trust, just in case that knot comes undone in the future. I just want a bit of a buffer, so I create those little tail ends and then I tie them together. Normally I really don't mind when yarn has knots in it if it's non-superwash, because I usually just felt the ends together, and so to me it's not a really big deal. But because this is superwash yarn, I can't do that. So in the inside of the wrap, I have a lot of these small tails where I join the yarn, and it's not really a big deal, but it's just not enjoyable when you have to keep breaking the yarn. So I wanted to get more progress on the second ball, just to report back if this was just like a one-off with that one ball of yarn. I'm hoping it was, or if maybe all of them have some of these joins in it. So I didn't get very far in the second ball. I didn't have enough time to knit it, but I'm hoping in the next podcast I can provide a little bit more of like a well-rounded review. But my first impression is like a little bit disappointed. I really like how soft it is, and the color selection is great, but not a huge fan of all those joins that are in that yarn. So yeah, I'll report back. So far, this is what it's looking like. Really like the color, and I'm excited to work the 1x1 color work. My next whip is the Franky Genser by Sandnes Garn. So this is a top-down saddle shoulder sweater. I'm working 2 different parts of the sweater here, so it's looking a little bit like a tangled mess. But I've worked on it quite a bit since the last episode. In the last episode, I think I just had the increases worked. I had joined for the front, and then I think I was working the increases for the shoulders. I've now since split to join in the round for the body, and I'm almost done casting off the collar. I was actually doing it this morning because I really wanted to finish it for the podcast, but I was running out of time because I really wanted to film while there is still daylight. So it's half done. I just thought I got to a point where you could kind of get the vision of what the collar is supposed to look like. So just excuse that little needle up there. But yeah, I am knitting the size medium in the pattern. I'm knitting the thinner gauge version. There's 2 different versions. So the thinner gauge, which is normally on 4mm needles, but since when I was knitting the gauge swatch for this, it was looking a little bit too, I just didn't like the finished fabric. It was a little bit too thin, kind of see-through. So I sized down to 3.5mm needles. So normally I would have knit the size small, but because I sized down to 3.5, I'm knitting the size medium. So far, I am really liking how this sweater works up. I have one saddle shoulder sweater, and I really like how that fits. So I'm excited to have this one and see, just to compare different silhouettes. So this one is worked top down in the round, and then you're working a saddle shoulder along the top. Hopefully this is a good angle to see what it looks like. So yeah, you work these increases, and then you join the body to work in the round. And then there's some twisted ribs. So this is half twisted rib, so just the knit stitch is twisted and then the purl stitch is not. So that's along the collar here. And then there's also super long hems for the arm and the body in half twisted rib, which I'm not that excited to work up, but I really like how it looks. And when I get to the point for the body, I'm going to be knitting a split half twisted rib hem. I think it's going to be really nice, and I'm modeling it after that Gap sweater, which I mentioned in my fall knitting plans video. So yeah, this was another, it's getting a little bit large, so maybe not the most portable project, but since this is just stockinette worked in the round, it was great to just pick up whenever I wanted more of that mindless knit in between all of the more fiddly smaller gauge ornament patterns. I'm hoping maybe I can get to the sleeves in my next podcast. I really miss not having like a new sweater cast off, so I want to finish either this one or my next whip pretty soon. And my last whip that I want to talk about is one that keeps making an appearance on my knitting podcast, but it is my April cardigan. So when I last showed you all what I was doing on my April cardigan, I think I had finished the body and the sleeves, and then I blocked it, but I hadn't picked up yet for the double knit button band. So I've since started working that slowly. You can see here I have the first 2 buttons, but I don't know if you can tell, but I have made a mistake and I just haven't frogged it yet. So this pattern is, if I haven't already mentioned, it's the April cardigan by Petite Knit, and this is a top-down cardigan with a saddle shoulder, so a little bit more of a narrow saddle shoulder than the one I just showed you, the Franky Genser. I really like the fit of saddle shoulders actually, so I've been making a few to kind of experiment and compare which one I think works best for me. I'm knitting the size medium. Normally I'm a size extra small or small for petite knit patterns, but again, I thought that the gauge would work better for me on 3.5mm needles with the yarn I'm using. I'm using Lang Jowl and knitting for Olive soft silk mohair. So I thought the gauge would work better if I sized down to 3.5, which meant that I'll just do a little bit more knitting calculations and knit a size up. So this is size medium. I blocked it and I really like the way that it's fitting so far. So I thought, okay, I'll just start knitting the double button band, or the double knit button band. And I am following a new video tutorial by Petite Knit, or the woman, I think her name is Kimmy Moncombe. I hope I'm not mispronouncing that. I'm gonna put their name on the screen. But there's a new double knit button band tutorial. I think it was for the Jenny jacket v-neck, but the tutorials are posted on YouTube, so you don't need to purchase the pattern in order to learn those techniques, which I think is really helpful and really great. And I actually saw this from Handmade by Florence's knitting podcast. I think not the most recent one, but the time before that, where she was talking about her fennel seed cardigan that she freehanded, and she talked about the new technique, which is how to work the buttonholes on a double knit button band without breaking the yarn. So in the past, I think the way that it was instructed is you would have to break the yarn when you were working one side of the column of the buttonhole, and then you would, once you finish, then you break the yarn, then you rejoin to work the other side, and then it ends up leaving you with quite a few ends to weave in. However, there's this new, it was such an ingenious or very helpful tutorial. I don't know how someone came up with that technique, but you can knit the buttonholes without breaking the yarn. So as I was saying, this has been a whip for a very long time. I think now 9 months, which might be the longest whip I've ever had. I usually don't have languishing whips. If I'm not working on something, I tend to frog it. So this is definitely the longest project I've had on my needles. And I was thinking to myself that maybe it paid a little bit for me to procrastinate working on this sweater because, or this cardigan, because that tutorial hadn't come out. And now that it has, it's been super handy to work this double knit button band. So if you haven't seen that tutorial yet, I definitely recommend that you check it out. It's super great. It's super helpful. But that doesn't mean that I haven't had my own issues with knitting this double knit button band. So I would say that I'm not a perfectionist, but I do like things to be a certain way with my knitted items. But that doesn't mean that I don't make a ton of mistakes. And I just think it's helpful when knitting podcasters kind of mention the mistakes that they made or things that they weren't happy with, so I can learn from them. So I hope like this doesn't look like I'm like a terrible knitter or anything like that. I just think it's part of the process of making. So this is the 4th time I've knit this button band. So I knit this cardigan on 3.5 millimeter needles, and based off of the instructions by Petite Knit, when you work the double knit button band, you usually size down 1.5 millimeter needles. So knit the main part of the body on 3.5, which meant that I should knit the double knit button band with 2 millimeter needles. And with double knitting, you have to knit the same row twice. So I was not, even though it's the same number of rows regardless of the needle size you're using, I was not really looking forward to doing that with 2 millimeter needles. They're just a lot thinner than what I'm used to working. I was worried they were gonna snap. It was kind of hurting my hands. So I had knit maybe up until this portion when I noticed that the cardigan was really cinching in quite a bit here. I think because even though that's the recommended needle, because I was not used to working on such a small size, I was really tense working it up. So it ended up being super tight and it was just cinching the cardigan in. So I thought, you know what, I'll just frog it. Then I was working it again, but I really didn't like my cast on edge. So then I ripped it out again. And then I was knitting on 3 millimeter needles. But something happened when I was knitting for that third time. Somehow, I don't know how, but I picked up a stitch somewhere over here with one of the needles and I knit the button band to the other part of the sweater. And I was really in a groove when I was knitting it. It was just like when I was watching an NBA basketball game. And so I watched the end of the game. I had worked a decent like 10 centimeters of the double knit button band. And then I held it up and it was attached to the other part of the cardigan. I don't know how I did that, but it was also like it was knitting in the evening. It was dark. I was preoccupied watching something else. So that was just a silly little mistake and I ended up needing to frog that. And so this is the fourth time which I have made another mistake again. I feel like I don't normally make this many mistakes, but now it's almost like funny how many times I've had to knit the button band. So when I mentioned that I knit the part of the band to the other part of the cardigan, when I frogged it, I frogged the button band and then I re-picked up stitches with the needle that's attached to the whole length of the edge of the cardigan. But I forgot to put the stitch marker that notes when you're supposed to work the button band. So I picked up the stitches, I did not put my stitch marker, which is going to tell me that, and then I went to meet up with some knitting friends yesterday and I thought, okay, I'll bring the button band because I'm a little bit frustrated with it and at least I can chat with some people while I'm working this kind of difficult and also I'm a little bit annoyed with it technique. So because I was preoccupied again, I did not notice I didn't have that stitch marker, and then we were just talking and at the end I realized when I was getting close to this one, I realized I didn't knit a button there. So there should be a button right here on the band and there's not. So I'm gonna need to frog it again and work it for a 5th time. I think though I'm gonna give it a few days because I'm a little bit sad about it, but I'm almost there. I don't think this has turned me off from knitting double knit button bands ever again because I really do like the way it's knitting up. I just am gonna learn from my mistakes and hopefully get it right for the first time next time. So now we've reached the plans part of this podcast and I want to talk a little bit about the scrap ornament make-along that I'm going to be hosting on Instagram. So I made an introductory or announcement post earlier this week and I maybe can just go over the details now, but it will be hosted solely on Instagram. So the scrap ornament make-along came about when I was posting some of the ornaments that I was making on Instagram and it got a lot of positive feedback. I was not expecting that. I just thought I would post it because it was fun, but a lot of people really wanted to make them, and for me it was a really great exercise of creativity because I was using only my scrap yarn. So I thought, why don't I host my first ever make along, and it will be using scrap yarn to make some more ornaments because I do want to make some more as well for my tree. So the make-along is going to run from November 25th to December 25th. I wanted to make it in the month leading up to Christmas. People are going to be, I think, putting up their tree if they celebrate Christmas around this time, so they can make some of these ornaments a little bit quickly, or it can make some really cute gift knits. It includes any type of fiber arts, so I wanted it to be as open and inclusive as possible. So knitting, crocheting, felting, weaving, anything where you're using some yarn scraps. And then all patterns and all yarn is welcome. Although scraps are encouraged, but you could use any pattern or any yarn that you have on hand. And so the rules and the giveaway for this make along is you have to post a photo, so it could be a finished object or a WIP, a work in progress, of an ornament that you're working on between November 25th to December 25th with the hashtag, I'll put it here, ScrapOrnamentMAL, to be entered into the giveaway. And the giveaway prize is, I'm going to be randomly drawing 2 winners that have used that hashtag to win a 25 Canadian dollar gift card to their local yarn store. I wasn't sure what I wanted the prize to be, but I thought this might be the most efficient and rewarding type of prize. I thought maybe like thinking of it as a little reward for using up some yarn scraps and treating yourself to maybe like a nicer skein of yarn. And I just thought, because I wanted it to be open worldwide, it would just be easier if I could do that, because then it eliminates any type of shipping costs or like duties or imports that might happen with sending some sort of physical prize. So yeah, they'll win a gift card to their local yarn store of choice. So I think those are all the rules and the giveaway prize, but I did want to mention, so when I was figuring out what I wanted to do for this make along, I reached out to Enya of Aften. So Enya is a designer of many different types of patterns. She has some Christmas patterns, some ornament patterns, and some baby mobile patterns, which I think are still the perfect size or scale to a Christmas tree as well. So those work really well. So I reached out to her and she kindly provided a discount code for us so we can knit any of the following 6 patterns. I'm going to put them here. I'm also going to put them down below just to save on time of talking about all of them. So there are 6 patterns. You can get 40% off of between November 25th and December 25th. So over the course of the make along. So you can get any of these patterns, you can make them, and it's just a bit of an added bonus. And I'm so happy that she kindly provided the code, because I just think they're all so cute. So for my plans, I'm gonna be casting on, to kick off the make along, the Aften's hot air balloon number 1, which is supposed to be, I believe, like a rattle or stroller decoration. It's a little hot air balloon, a little stuffed hot air balloon. I just thought it was so cute. It's the smaller version of the 2. There's 2 versions on her website. So this one I'm going to be knitting as an ornament pattern. There are some modifications that I have to make, so I'm going to be scaling it to be more of an ornament, and I'm going to try and work the different panels of the air balloon with intarsia, I think, with different scraps. So each panel of the hot air balloon is going to be a different color. So there's going to be some modifications that I'm going to make to the pattern. But as I learned with a lot of the other ornament patterns, almost all of them I made modifications to, and it's pretty easy to figure out because with the ornament you're seeing how it's created all at once. It's not like a sweater where you're working, I guess, different pieces and you're not sure how it's going to turn out. With the ornament you can kind of see everything, so it's easier to make those modifications. So yes, I'm going to be knitting it a little bit smaller. I'm going to try and work certain parts together just to save some time. And this pattern I thought was really fun because it is knit and crochet. So the balloon part of the hot air balloon is knitted, and then the basket is also knit, but then the little ties or strings that hold piece together are all crochet. So I thought that was really cute because I don't usually bring up my crochet hook that much anymore, but I'm excited to pick it up for this project. So this is the ornament that I'm going to be kicking off the make along with, and I hope I'll update you on Instagram, but I'm really excited to start. And now we've reached the last segment of the podcast, my acquisitions. So I have some acquisitions to show you, and I have some project ideas in mind, so maybe I'll just mention them as well when I'm showing the yarn. So this yarn is from Originally Lovely, which I haven't used before, but I'm really excited to try out. So they reached out to me, so I just want to mention this yarn is gifted, and they reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to try any of their yarn. And so I was looking at the different bases. They have a really big emphasis on using 100% natural and sustainable types of fibers and products. So I was really intrigued by it, and I was really excited to try it out. So I have received 2 different yarns from them. So the first one is the Fluff line, and it is an Aran weight. It's 50 grams and 130 meters. It's 70% baby alpaca, 7% merino wool, and 23% polyamide. So this yarn here, I believe there's 10 colorways on their website. A lot of them are like pretty bright jewel tones. This yarn reminds me of like a thicker, fluffier version of Drops Air. So hopefully you can kind of see what that fiber looks like. But it is a blown construction yarn, so there's the polyamide tube, and then they blow in the alpaca fiber. So that's why it reminds me a lot of the Drops Air, but it just has a little bit more fluff to it, or it just feels a little bit more like substantial or squishier. So I'm excited to work with this yarn. I have 4 balls, and I picked the shade Lapis because I cannot pass up like a cobalt or electric blue when I see it. So when I saw that as one of the options, I thought, you know what, I really want to get that, and I want to make a matching set. So I got 4 balls, so it's around like almost 500 meters, and I'm thinking of making a Sophie shawl and penny gloves set. I know you're not supposed to use blown yarn like this because it's a little bit more delicate for harder wearing projects because it tends to pill, but I actually made these penny gloves with Drops Air last year, and they've held up really well. So I really wanted to make that again, but in this bright electric blue, and try and make some a Sophie shawl to try and match it. So I have enough yarn. I was hoping to get to it this year, but that was before I started making all of these ornaments. So we'll see how far I get, but I really want to make it. I think it could be a really fun striking set, especially when it gets so cold in Toronto. I have like a black parka that I wear, and I just thought maybe this electric blue can kind of brighten it up a little bit. So hopefully I get to it soon, but that's my current plans with this one right now. And the second line that they sent me is their Cria line, which is a worsted weight, 100% baby alpaca, 50 grams for every 100 meters, and I got it in the shade Chestnut. So this one also has more of a smaller range, but all really nice shades. There's quite a few nice like red or burgundy shades in this line. There's 11 colors if I didn't mention. And so I picked this color because I used to have a store-bought sweater that was textured and all over like cables and different types of stitch patterns. So I used to have that. I think it was from Urban Outfitters a long time ago, but ever since I started knitting, I donated or have given away a lot of my store-bought sweaters because I just wear my hand knits a lot. So I gave that sweater away, but ever since then, like I haven't been able to get it out of my head, and I really want to recreate it, like a hand knit version. So this is like almost identical to the shade that I got. And it kind of reminds me the most of the Moby sweater, another petite knit pattern, but it just so happened to be like that. I really like their patterns, and the sweater looked like that sweater. So I want to make that, but I'm just having a little bit of a dilemma. So this is 100% baby alpaca, which is extremely soft, and I picked it because I thought like I really liked all of the colors, and I thought like having good drape would work well for like a heavier Aran weight sweater. But what I was realizing is, or what I learned is, with 100% alpaca, it's not the best for showing stitch texture. So I have to still work up the swatch to see, but I don't know how it's gonna work up with the double moss stitch or the cables. I think maybe it could get a little bit lost from what I was learning from another knitter who I was talking to on Instagram. So if I am not able to make the Moby sweater because it has really nice drape, I think I'm gonna make this into, I have enough yarn to make a sweater dress. So if the all over textured Moby doesn't work out, I haven't looked at a pattern specifically yet, but I was thinking of turning the Lyon sweater into just extending the length and turning it into a really nice sweater dress. And since it has good drape, I think it would work really well for that. So I still have a backup for that, but when I get to it is another question. But I'm really excited to try out this yarn. And thank you again to Originally Lovely for sending me this. Once I knit this up, I can provide a little bit more of a fulsome review of the yarn, but this is just my first impression so far. All right, and that's the end and a wrap to my third knitting podcast. Thank you again for watching. Thank you for coming back if you're a returning viewer. If you're new here, I hope you subscribe and want to follow along. But lots of things on the go, and I'm super excited to kick off the scrap ornament make along. So if you want to make any ornaments, now is the best time to join the make along and use up some of your scraps. So with that, I'll see you in my next video.